Emily Grant thought she had found love in the arms of a man who truly understood her, but Daniel, the charming online boyfriend she trusted, was hiding a secret so dark it would shatter her world. Mark Grant, her husband, was respected in the community, but his sudden and brutal death would expose a chilling truth, that the man Emily believed was her escape was in fact her husband's killer. Emily Grant lived a life that looked ordinary from the outside but felt like a prison from the inside. To her neighbors and friends, she and her husband Mark appeared to be the perfect couple. They owned a modest but beautiful home, hosted gatherings from time to time, and were well known in their community. Mark worked as a respected businessman who carried himself with confidence, and Emily played the role of the supportive wife. But behind the closed doors of their home, the truth was far different. Their marriage was strained, held together only by routine and appearance. Emily felt trapped in a cycle of silence and distance, with every day blending into the next. Mark's cold demeanor left her feeling invisible, as though her presence no longer mattered in the life they once dreamed of building together. For years, Emily buried her loneliness beneath layers of responsibility. She cooked, cleaned, attended local events, and smiled when expected, all while hiding the emptiness she carried inside. There were no shouting matches or violent outbursts, but the absence of love was its own kind of suffocation. She remembered the early days of her marriage when she and Mark shared laughter and dreams, yet those memories felt like they belonged to strangers. The man she once loved had become distant and detached, and no matter how hard she tried, Emily could not find a way back to him. It was during those long, quiet nights, when Mark worked late and the house echoed with silence, that Emily discovered the world of online forums. At first, it was nothing more than a distraction, a way to pass time scrolling through conversations with strangers who shared her interests. She didn't expect to find anything meaningful, but one evening, while scrolling through a thread about relationships, she noticed a username that kept appearing. The person behind it, calling himself Daniel, seemed thoughtful in his responses, leaving kind words for others who shared their struggles. Something about his writing drew her in, and curiosity nudged her to reply to one of his comments. That small interaction quickly became the start of something more. Emily and Daniel began exchanging messages, casual at first, then more personal as the days turned into weeks. She found herself opening up to him in ways she hadn't dared to with anyone else. He listened, or at least appeared to, responding with empathy and reassurance. Slowly, he became her secret. When Mark came home late and retreated into his own world, Emily stayed awake in the soft glow of her laptop screen, waiting for Daniel's replies. It felt like discovering a lifeline in a sea of emptiness. With every message, Daniel seemed to understand her more deeply. He told her she deserved happiness, that she had been strong for too long, and that she shouldn't feel guilty for wanting more. Those words filled a void inside her, convincing her that someone out there truly saw her pain. She began to crave the comfort of his presence online, even imagining what life might be like if they could meet. Though they were separated by screens and miles, Emily began to feel connected to him in a way she hadn't felt in years. In those moments, she allowed herself to believe she had found something pure and real. She thought Daniel represented a chance for freedom, for the life she had been quietly longing for. What she didn't realize was that this new connection was the beginning of a path darker than any she could have imagined. The man who seemed to offer escape and hope was already tightening invisible threads around her life, and every message she read pulled her closer to a truth she was not yet ready to face. Daniel quickly became the center of Emily's secret world. Every message he sent seemed crafted to soothe her heart and build her trust. He asked about her childhood, her favorite memories, and even small details of her daily life. He noticed things she barely thought about herself, such as how she often mentioned the sound of rain, or how she avoided speaking about Mark directly. He responded with words that made her feel cherished, telling her she deserved joy and promising that better days lay ahead. To Emily, Daniel was not just a stranger on the other side of a screen. He was a lifeline pulling her out of the dull ache of her marriage. What captivated her most was the way Daniel seemed to know what she needed to hear. When she felt hopeless, he spoke of resilience. When she admitted her loneliness, he painted vivid pictures of a future they might share. He told her about quiet mornings together, about long walks, about the kind of tenderness she thought had disappeared from her life forever. Emily clung to these visions, letting them become a secret daydream she carried wherever she went. In the middle of grocery shopping or while folding laundry, she caught herself smiling at the thought of Daniel's imagined embrace. Yet for all the closeness she felt, there were shadows that unsettled her. Daniel often deflected questions about his own life. He claimed he had a complicated past, something painful that made it hard for him to open up. Sometimes he disappeared for a few days without warning, then returned with vague excuses about work or personal struggles. Emily tried to ignore the unease those absences stirred. She reminded herself that everyone carried secrets, and after all, he always came back with words that calmed her fears. As their bond deepened, Emily started taking risks she never thought she would. She deleted their conversations regularly, terrified Mark might somehow find them, though he rarely paid attention to what she did. She invented excuses to spend more time alone at night, pretending to be reading or busy with housework, while in truth she waited for Daniel's next message. The secrecy both frightened and excited her, and the thrill of it made her feel alive in a way she had not felt for years. Daniel fed this excitement skillfully. He began to hint at the possibility of a real future together. He told her she didn't have to stay trapped in her current life, that love and happiness were worth chasing, no matter the risk. He wrote about new beginnings, about leaving behind the pain of the past, about freedom. His words carried the weight of promise, and Emily believed them. She began to imagine herself walking away from her marriage, stepping into a new chapter with Daniel by her side. What Emily couldn't see was the careful way Daniel had positioned himself in her life. His attention, his timing, even his mysterious silences were not accidents. Every word and every gesture had been part of a plan. He knew how to play on her loneliness, how to weave hope into her despair, and how to make her believe she was finally seen. Emily was too consumed by the comfort of his presence to recognize that the man she thought was saving her was, in truth, leading her deeper into danger. The night everything changed began like so many others. The sky was heavy with rain, and Mark had left the house earlier than usual, saying he had a late meeting at the office. Emily thought little of it, as his long absences had become routine. She spent the evening curled up on the couch waiting for a message from Daniel, who had been strangely quiet that day. The storm outside rattled the windows, but inside, the silence was far more unsettling. Hours passed, and Mark still had not returned. It wasn't until blue and red lights flashed across the living room walls that Emily's world was upended. 2 police officers stood at her door, their expressions grave. They informed her that Mark had been found dead inside his car, parked along a desolate road on the outskirts of town. He had suffered violent injuries, the kind that left no doubt his death was no accident. Emily stood frozen, the words sinking slowly into her mind. For years, she had pictured a life without Mark, dreamed of an escape, but never like this. The reality of death, bloody, final, and cruel, was something she could not have imagined. Her knees nearly buckled as the officers continued, explaining they were treating the case as a homicide and would be in contact with her during the investigation. In the days that followed, Emily's grief twisted into confusion. She wept during the funeral, surrounded by sympathetic faces, but inside she felt a gnawing sense of unease. The loss was real, yet it came tangled with a secret she could not share. While neighbors delivered casseroles and whispered condolences, Emily clung to her hidden lifeline. Daniel had finally messaged her the night of the tragedy, offering words of comfort that seemed oddly calm, almost rehearsed. He told her to stay strong, that she was free now, that this was her chance at a new beginning. His tone was steady, too steady, and though she tried to draw solace from his words, a sliver of doubt pierced through. Detectives soon began circling closer to her life. They asked about Mark's routine, his habits, his relationships. They wanted to know about enemies, debts, disputes. Emily answered carefully, afraid of saying too much, terrified that her secret correspondence might be discovered. Still, she couldn't ignore the strange tension between the timing of Mark's death and Daniel, see sudden reassurance. How could he be so certain everything would be all right? How could he know what she needed to hear so quickly, almost as if he had been waiting for the moment? The nights grew longer and colder as suspicion festered in her mind. Emily replayed her conversations with Daniel, looking for something she might have missed. She thought about the way he sometimes seemed to know details of her life she had never shared. She wondered about the gaps in his stories, the silences that stretched too long, the moments when he seemed to vanish only to return with impeccable timing. For the first time, she felt a sharp divide between what she wanted to believe and what the evidence whispered in the back of her mind. As police intensified their investigation, Emily began to sense the walls closing in. She had once viewed Daniel as her rescuer, her escape from loneliness. But now there was an uneasiness she could not silence. She did not yet know the truth, but in the hollow quiet of her home, she could feel it stirring like a shadow just beyond her reach. The tragedy of losing Mark was only the beginning, and with every passing day, Emily edged closer to a revelation more terrifying than her grief. Emily's unease grew into something she could no longer ignore. At first, she told herself her doubts about Daniel were unfair, just the product of grief twisting her thoughts. Yet, as days turned into weeks, the investigation unearthed details that made her heart pound with dread. Police had discovered that Mark's car had not been randomly abandoned. The area where it was found was remote, hidden from the main road, and whoever left it there had chosen the location carefully. Detectives suggested the killer might have known Mark personally, someone familiar with his schedule and movements. Emily nodded quietly during the questioning, but inside her chest her heart thudded painfully. Daniel had always seemed to know more than he should, and now the puzzle pieces began to fit together in ways she desperately wished they wouldn't. Late one night, unable to sleep, Emily scrolled back through her old messages with Daniel. A chill ran through her body when she stumbled across something she had once brushed off without thought. Weeks before Mark's death, Daniel had mentioned a road he claimed reminded him of her, describing the curve of the trees and the quiet isolation of the place. Emily's stomach sank as she realized it was the very same area where Mark's car had been discovered. How could Daniel have known about that spot unless he had been there? Her mind raced as she tried to recall other hints she had ignored. Daniel had once told her he hated men who made women feel small. He had insisted she deserved more than a husband who neglected her. At the time, she took it as a gesture of support, a sign of his devotion. Now those words sounded like something darker, almost like a vow. The more she reread, the clearer it became that his attention had never been accidental. His words carried an edge she had refused to see before, and now they echoed in her ears like a warning she had been too blind to hear. Emily's fear deepened when police revealed they had traced phone activity in the hours surrounding Mark's murder. The calls and signals placed a mysterious device within miles of the crime scene. The number was unregistered, but its digital fingerprints bore similarities to the anonymous accounts Daniel used to speak with her. Emily felt her throat tighten, realizing she might be falling in love with the very person investigators were circling closer toward. She tried to push the thought away, convincing herself she was overthinking, but the evidence only mounted. One afternoon, while organizing old emails, she found a picture Daniel had sent months earlier, one she had adored at the time. It showed him near a rustic cafe with an old sign in the background. She hadn't noticed then, but now she recognized the landmark instantly. It was only a short drive from where Mark S.'s body had been found. Her blood ran cold as she stared at the photograph, her hands trembling so violently she nearly dropped her phone. The illusion of safety that Daniel had woven around her began to unravel strand by strand. Every detail she once cherished now looked sinister. Every coincidence seemed deliberate. She was forced to face the possibility that Daniel had been far closer to her life than she ever understood, watching her, studying her, planning his moves with precision. What had once felt like the start of freedom now felt like a trap closing in around her. As Emily lay awake in the dark, her mind spun with terror. She wanted to believe she was mistaken, that Daniel was still the savior she longed for, but the weight of the evidence was crushing. Somewhere deep inside, she knew the truth was already there, waiting to reveal itself. The man she had let into her heart was not who he claimed to be, and the reality of what he might have done was beginning to suffocate her. The investigation reached a breaking point when detectives uncovered new evidence that tied everything together. Surveillance footage emerged from a gas station near Mark's office, taken only days before his death. The grainy video showed a man in a hooded jacket pacing near the pumps, his face partially hidden. When investigators enhanced the footage, Emily felt her stomach lurch. She recognized the figure instantly, not because she had seen him in person, but because his build and stance matched the photos Daniel had shared with her online. For weeks, she had been drowning in suspicion, but seeing that image left no room for denial. The man she had trusted, confided in, and even dreamed of a future with was now a shadow looming over her husband's murder. Police traced financial records, phone signals, and online accounts, unraveling a trail that revealed Daniel's true identity. His name wasn't Daniel at all. Years earlier, he had worked briefly under Mark at a local company, but his employment had ended abruptly after a dispute. Records showed that he had been fired for misconduct, and since then he had vanished into obscurity. What no one knew was that he had harbored a deep resentment, one that slowly festered into something darker. When he found Emily online, he saw an opportunity not only for revenge against Mark, but also for control over the woman Mark had once called his own. Emily was called into the station to hear the findings. As detectives laid out the evidence, she felt as though the floor beneath her was crumbling. The man she thought had saved her from loneliness had instead orchestrated a nightmare. Every kind word, every gentle promise, every moment of comfort had been calculated to manipulate her into trusting him. He had entered her life not by chance, but by design, circling her like prey, weaving himself into her heart until she was too blind to see the danger. When police finally arrested him, the details of his plan emerged with chilling clarity. He had followed Mark for weeks, learning his habits and routines. He had chosen the night of the storm deliberately, knowing the weather would mask his movements and erase evidence. His online relationship with Emily had not been a side story, but the central piece of his scheme. He wanted to shatter Mark's world entirely, not just by ending his life, but by taking his place in Emily's. The murder had been both revenge and possession, a twisted combination that revealed the true depth of his obsession. For Emily, the revelation was devastating. She was left to grapple with the unbearable truth that her search for love and escape had opened the door to her husband's killer. She had fallen into a web of lies, spun with such precision that she hadn't noticed the trap tightening around her until it was too late. The freedom she longed for had come at a price she could never repay, and the betrayal left scars far deeper than grief alone. In the end, Daniel, whose real name was released during the trial, was convicted of murder, his manipulations laid bare before the court. Emily sat through every hearing, her face pale, her heart heavy, realizing that her private messages and hidden hopes had all been part of the evidence. She was both victim and witness, forced to confront the horrifying reality that she had trusted the very man who destroyed her life. When the trial ended and justice was served, Emily returned to an empty home. The silence felt heavier than before, a reminder of everything she had lost. She understood now that loneliness had driven her into the arms of a predator, and the cost of that mistake would haunt her forever. What began as an innocent search for comfort had ended in betrayal so complete that it blurred the line between love and violence, leaving Emily to live with the chilling truth. She had loved her husband's murderer without ever realizing it.